Welcome to today's Explainer. We are diving into a really fascinating aspect of neurological and physical recovery today. We're looking at the journey of a keystroke. We'll be breaking down exactly how an ordinary, everyday computer keyboard becomes an absolutely crucial shaping task in constraint-induced movement therapy for stroke rehabilitation. It's simple, it's highly structured, and as you'll see, it is incredibly effective. So here is our roadmap for today. First, understanding CIMT. Second, setting up the task. Third, mastering the movement. Fourth, strategies for progression. And finally, tracking the results. Let's jump right into Section 1, Understanding CIMT. So, CIMT stands for Constraint-Induced Movement Therapy. By definition, it's a therapeutic intervention used in the rehabilitation of the upper extremity post-stroke. Basically, we are talking about highly targeted recovery for the arms and hands. This isn't just generic exercise. It's a specialized clinical intervention designed to literally force that upper extremity to work, to adapt, and ultimately to recover its function. Everything we're going to discuss from here on out is completely anchored in that one goal. Moving on to Section 2, setting up the task. The actual setup here is remarkably simple. If you're a practitioner guiding a patient, here are the exact sequential actions you need to take. Step 1. Place the keyboard on the table. Nothing fancy, just a stable surface. Step 2. Have the subject place their hand on the table. And Step 3. Ask the subject to depress a key repeatedly with one finger at a time. It sounds almost too basic, doesn't it? But within this super simple sequence is a really profound therapeutic challenge. We're essentially narrowing the patient's entire world down to just a single finger and a single key. Now, there is a very specific caveat for this setup. The subject absolutely must keep their forearm as flat as possible on the table. Why? Well, human bodies are incredibly smart, right? When one part is weak, other parts immediately try to compensate. By keeping that forearm perfectly flat, we're essentially locking out those other joints and muscles. We're forcing the hand and the fingers to do the actual heavy lifting. The only exception mentioned in the source material is if the keyboard is placed on a box to increase the height. Obviously, if you adjust the height, the angle of the arm naturally changes. But the core principle? That stays the same, stabilizing the arm to focus all the work entirely on the fingers. Okay, Section 3, Mastering the Movement. This right here is the absolute core goal of the activity. The subject must isolate individual finger movements. And this goes right back to what we were just talking about with the forearm. In post-stroke rehab, the brain often tries to recruit entire muscle groups just to perform a really simple action. Like a patient might try to use their shoulder or their whole arm just to push down a single key. By instructing the subject to isolate those individual finger movements, you're actively preventing those compensatory tricks. It's this intense exercise in neurological discipline, ensuring that the exact right signals are making their way from the brain all the way to the fingertips. So this breaks down into two primary emphasized movements that the keyboard task targets. Movement 1 is finger flexion. That's the actual downward pressing of the key. But honestly, just as important is movement 2, finger extension. That's the lifting of the finger off the key, releasing the pressure and getting back to the starting position. In the context of recovering from a stroke, both of these actions, just bending and straightening the finger, can be incredibly demanding. So the keyboard task acts like a tiny, highly focused gym for both flexion and extension. Let's look at Section 4, Strategies for Progression. Once they master the basics, how do we advance the therapy? Well, there are two primary progression parameters: distance and duration. If the clinical goal is to challenge the elbow, you change the distance. You literally just move the keyboard farther away from the subject, which forces them to engage their elbow extension just to reach the keys. On the flip side, if the clinical goal is to challenge their endurance, you adjust the duration. You just increase the amount of time they're required to perform the continuous keystrokes. It's kind of amazing how such simple adjustments in physical space or time can yield such specific, powerful clinical benefits. I actually want to linger on this exact quote from the source text for just a second. Move the keyboard farther away from the subject to challenge elbow extension. I love this because it brilliantly illustrates the elegance of this shaping task. You really don't need highly complex, expensive tools to introduce a profound new physical challenge for stroke recovery. You literally just take an everyday object and slide it a few inches across a desk. Suddenly, a task that was entirely about isolated finger movement is now forcing the elbow to extend and the arm to reach. It's practical, it's immediate, and it scales perfectly with a patient's progress. And finally, Section 5, tracking the results. So there are two distinct feedback tracking methods you can use here. Strategy A relies on tracking the number of repetitions. Basically, you give the patient a set period of time, say exactly 1 minute, and count how many key depressions they can accomplish within that limit. You're measuring volume against a ticking clock. Conversely, Strategy B completely flips the script by tracking time. Here, you give the patient a set number of repetitions to complete, let's say 50 keystrokes, and you time how long it takes them to hit that goal, measuring speed against a target number. Both strategies give you incredibly valuable quantitative data on the patient's recovery. Just to quickly summarize the actionable data points you walk away with at the end of the session, we have 4 distinct pillars based on our source material. First, tracking repetitions against time. Second, tracking time against repetitions. Third, through the distance progression we talked about, monitoring elbow extension. And fourth, through the duration progression, monitoring overall endurance. By meticulously tracking these parameters, you're turning a simple typing exercise into a highly precise medical chart of the patient's upper extremity rehab.